welcome, Shyamala.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And so your background is psychotherapy, and love to hear your journey in terms of, becoming a psychotherapist and what has brought you to your next evolution in terms of Creatrix.
Yeah. So I've retired as a psychotherapist, but I practiced psychotherapy for about 20 years. And when I was practicing, I was licensed as a psychotherapist, but also as a couple and family therapist. And so my specialization and the area that I was always really, really interested in is relationships and sort of how, not only how do relationships function, but how do we function inside of relationships. And sort of as my career evolved, I became more and more interested in women in particular and how do women function inside of relationships? How does our mental health affect how we function inside of relationships? Emotional intelligence became a big part of my work. And then I added in energetics, human design, all sorts of different ways of working with people, different lenses through which we can see ourselves and kind of get to know ourselves in a deeper way. And so my journey through psychotherapy, I started out practicing as a solo practitioner. I grew a group practice. I still own and operate the Kiru Psychotherapy Clinic. And so we serve the public, and we also serve as a training center for master's level clinicians. And over the last few years, I've transitioned out of private practice entirely. And that's when I launched my coaching business, which you referenced already. The Creatrix Method is a year mentorship that I have within my coaching business. And so I retired my psychotherapy license. I think it's been about a solid year now, about a year ago.
And would you say, like, for women, I always liken it to we seem a bit more vulnerable than men to keeping our heads down, keeping everything going after we have a partner and have kids and we're trying to grow our career, and really losing touch with even understanding who we are. If we ever invested the time to really kind of reflect and think about, who am I as a person and what do I want? And so, what's your sort of perspective on the current state of women as it relates to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think generally speaking, I feel like one of the greatest vulnerabilities that women have always had is losing ourselves. Like always. I think that's like for generations, women, that's one of our greatest vulnerabilities. I think it just has looked different perhaps in my mom's generation
Right.
versus my generation. I have a daughter, like it's probably going
Mm-hmm.
to look different in her generation. But I think at our core, one of the things we really, really struggle with is maintaining our sense of self, maintaining our sense of identity within the context of our relationships and within the context of just the world. Like I think we're so used to abandoning ourselves, losing ourselves. We tend to get kind of lost in our relationships and in the roles that we play. And I think this has like always been the issue. I just think it looks different now. I think more women obviously are in the workforce and we're, running businesses and we're pursuing our passion, using our voice in different ways. But I still feel like that's the common struggle is I have clients that come to me all the time. And one of the first things they say is like, I feel like I've completely lost myself. Like I don't know who I am. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I've sort of lived my life for everybody else and according to everybody else's expectations.
Right.
Right. And so this like coming back to ourselves, this really asking ourselves the tough questions around who am I really? And what do I truly desire? Like, what do I desire for myself? And do I have the courage to go after it? Like, I think these are some of the common questions that I see.
And, I often think about people who are unaware of that aha moment of like they just sort of have a sense of unfulfillment or unhappiness, but they don't have that spark to be like, oh, I really need to spend some time with myself and understand myself. Is there something, some magic words or some things, or is it just sort of luck of the draw that people get to kind of have that wake up moment?
That's another great question. Um, so something you said there, I started smiling because it really struck me is um, this sense of this lack of fulfillment that so many women have. And like, when do we have that wake up moment around
Mm-hmm.
that? I think one of the biggest things we've been taught is that our joy, our satisfaction, our fulfillment, our personal power, all of that's outside of us. Like it's out there somewhere.
Right,
Like
right,
it's in a status, or it's in like,
right.
like a certain lifestyle, or it's in my partner, or how great my kids are doing, or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. It's somehow outside of us. And I think the women that have that like real, not just an aha moment, but the women who really step into like true transformations are the ones that realize like nothing is outside of us, not a single thing. Like
Yeah,
everything, I believe, begins and ends with me,
right.
And
100%.
so, right? Like the choices that I make, the
Yeah,
thoughts that I have,
yeah.
the energy that I hold, whether or not I choose to invest in myself. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
women don't. Like a
A
lot of
lot of women
women,
don't. We
we
just did
struggle with
I
that.
know, we just did a whole thing on it, and I was so shocked by the data around prioritization of even health from men to
Mm-hmm.
women.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of have a network of women who do invest in themselves. So I'm always shocked at the tendency for women to not want to invest in themselves, whether it be time or, money towards something. It's just shocking to me.
Yes, energy, like all of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the, and again, like so much of that is how, like, the role of the feminine, like how we've been raised is, and it is truly an aspect of the feminine energy, is that very nurturing presence.
Mm-hmm.
But quite often we fail to nurture ourselves. Like we fail to, like, that is the energy that we hold. And
Mm-hmm.
the feminine is very nurturing. But we are accustomed to, and we are raised to nurture everybody else. And so we often fail to nurture ourselves and hold that energy for ourselves.
Well, I think too, I had the realization it's similar to physical exercise. Like you have to continually invest in doing something. And the same goes towards understanding who you are as a person, what your values are, taking stock of, have I let that fall a little bit, and recharging and kind of going at it again. Do you agree
Mm.
with that?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's just like I love that. It's a really practical example, the piece around physical exercise. But I think we do that with everything. Like with what like I think
Yeah.
with everything we have this tendency to put ourselves last on the list. Basically, right? Like if you
Mm-hmm.
look, I always say like look at a person's schedule and you can tell what their priorities
Mm,
are, right? And so like for so many women, they struggle to put themselves in their own schedule, right? With something like exercise or their health or whatever their goals are, their
yeah.
intentions
Yeah.
are. We have such a hard time putting ourselves on our own schedule, putting ourselves on our own priority list.
Yeah.
But the research is really, really clear. When we don't prioritize ourselves, like our relationships suffer. We
Absolutely.
actually, right? Like it
Absolutely.
doesn't, yeah,
No, we're not happy. We get resentful. We're tired. Like I always
yeah.
believed in if I, do that run event or I go to this, then I'm going to be a much better mom.
Mm,
And I have zero guilt about any of that. But
yes.
it's a tough thing for women to kind of wrap their brains around, I think, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it comes from like years of conditioning, like generations
Yeah.
actually of
Yeah.
conditioning. Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually this interesting perspective of evolutionary conditioning where it's actually in our genetics that's passed
Mm,
over time,
mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really looked deeply into, but I just think it kind of makes sense a little bit. And one of the most amazing things I do think about perimenopause is this, roller coaster of craziness where
Mm.
you are, your mood's going, you're sore, you're tired, whatever your permutation of symptoms might be. But it almost brings you to a point for many where it's like, I just can't do this anymore. And it
Yeah.
almost creates a bottom or a situation of crisis where you're
Mm.
involuntarily forced to do that inner work of really kind of for self-reflecting. And have you noticed anything like that among women that are part of your care?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that so I'm 48, and you know, I didn't really take an honest look at myself, my life, my level of fulfillment probably until I was in my 40s. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and for a lot, I mean, I work with women probably from about like 30 and up is kind of my demographic that I work with. Um, and for most women, what I have found is it's either a significant life transition that they're going through that can create this kind of like, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually not happy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm actually not fulfilled. Or just like you were saying, and perimenopause is a life transition, going through, something that really changes our mental, like everything's affected, right, through our hormones and that journey through perimenopause and menopause. Our mental health is affected, our physiological health is affected, the way that we see ourselves is all affected. And so often these significant transitions can be a real opportunity,
Mhm.
like an opportunity to kind almost like reevaluate,
Right.
ask ourselves those hard questions.
And then I think too, the downside of that is, how do you maintain trust in what you think and you feel when your
Mm.
emotions are all over the map and you're not sure if you can trust what you think or feel about certain people or relationships. I would imagine is difficult too.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I think so part of my work, like one of the foundations of my work is really helping women to connect with their emotions, but also learn how to regulate their emotions,
Mhm.
regulate their nervous system. And one of the things that I deeply believe is that I actually think it's completely impossible to get clarity on anything, a decision that we need to make, whether something's in alignment or not, kind of what our next steps are, whatever it is. It's almost impossible to get clarity unless we are regulated, like nervous system regulated, emotions are regulated. And that doesn't mean we don't experience ups and downs. But one of the things that I really do try to encourage the women that I work with to do is to consider options, make decisions, those sorts of things when they are at a place where they are feeling more regulated.
100%. And I think related to that, it's sort of um, consider the hormone therapy as a tool to regulate if it's right for you. But
Mm-hmm.
investing in those things that you're talking about in terms of, seeing the triggers, knowing that you're kind of in that space and having the confidence to park. I'm not going to make a decision about that, or really biting on your tongue and not saying anything until
Yes.
you can get into that space where you've calmed yourself. And if you spend time, you can actually really get in tune and feel that your nervous system is agitated, or you're not in a calm state
Yes.
if you really kind of focus on
Yes.
that, right?
A
Yeah.
100%. Like one of the I think like there's a few really quick, easy ways to know that you're dysregulated. One is your breath.
Okay.
Like if your breathing is shallow, you're dysregulated. 100% of the time. If your breathing is shallow, either your nervous system is dysregulated or just emotionally, like you're triggered, you're upset, you're emotionally dysregulated. And sometimes those things can go hand in hand, but breathing is one of the first things that I'll kind of coach women to really pay attention to. Is even just when you're speaking, we're breathing as we're speaking. And so our vocal quality or our vocal tone shifts in conversation when we're dysregulated. And so just paying
Right.
attention to that. And the second thing is our heart rate. Like
Right.
that's another really easy indicator. Quite often it's easier to perceive if we're feeling anxious or fearful or overwhelmed. That's usually when our heart rate will increase. And then that, of course, will then affect our breath, which then affects our vocal quality.
Exactly. Exactly. I was at a big speaking event and I was calm and ready to go. And then all of a sudden I just got this like anxiety out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter came in the room and I was like, I don't know what's happening, but like I can't speak and my heart's racing. And so we just did
Yeah.
she walked me through some just basic box breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a great speaking event. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it really is magic when you start to do
Yes.
the work and practice it.
Yes.
Yes, yes, for sure.
Yeah. And it's just practice. Like it's just
Yeah,
it's what you said, right? It's just practice. Like we these are skills that we can all learn. Um and the more we practice these sorts of skills, like especially just tuning in to our breath, tuning into our body, like tuning into how we're feeling internally, it becomes easier and easier to catch ourselves.
And do you find women receptive to learning that? And like, what are some tricks for people to be able to turn that into a habit? To remember,
Yeah.
okay, I've got to practice. Like, how do you
Yeah.
turn that into
Yeah.
something that's sustainable?
So I do actually like to answer your first question. I do feel women are quite receptive to this kind of work. I feel like we live in an amazing era where we do have so many like tools available to us, so many resources available to us, and I think more and more we're beginning to understand that the quality of our lives is so greatly impacted by how we show up to it, right? Like my life gets better when I show up to it
Yeah,
differently, right? And
yeah,
I show up in my power. Like,
yeah.
so that's, I think, something to celebrate. But in terms of like a real, how to start, like how to kind of start on this journey, one of the things I always recommend my clients do is make a commitment to having space carved out on a daily basis to have some sort of a practice that allows you to turn inward. And there's
Yeah.
so many different
So
practices,
many different
right?
ways.
For
Yeah.
this. So meditation, breath work, there's so many different ways we can do this. So I try not to be super prescriptive about what has to be done.
Yeah.
But I think the more important thing is that you've got space carved out in your schedule. And the only goal with that time and with that space is that you're connecting with yourself. You're connecting back to yourself. You're turning inwards. You're learning to silence some of that mind chatter that we're so used to entertaining, and really practicing silencing the mind and then turning back internally.
Um, you reminded me of something, and now I've completely had a brain fog moment when you were saying that. But oh, I know what I was going to say. I was going to say, like, put it in your calendar for the day, but then don't let somebody say, "Oh, but I have this practice," or "Can you just pop into this
Yeah.
meeting?" Like it's like owning
Yes.
the boundaries around your time
Yes.
is
Yes.
such a feels like such a hard thing to do at the start. But once you start doing it, you really realize that the people around you don't really care and they respect it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they needed you,
Mm-hmm.
they'll work around it. But it
Mm-hmm.
seems to be so hard for women not to just sort of let go of what they had planned and help other people that need help. So, yeah,
Yes. Yeah, I know. I was just talking about this with a client. She asked me this very same question. It's like, I have this time blocked out, but then if something comes up, I'm like, well, that's kind of free time. No, it's not free time. It's like, it's
yeah,
your time.
yeah. Yeah,
Right?
it's shifting that mindset that it's not free time.
Yeah.
It's your
Yeah.
time, the most important thing that you're going to do today, and
Yeah.
owning that.
Yeah. And one of the things I have done for a long time that's really helped me is I put it at the top of my day. Right? Like it's kind of like the first thing I meditate. I start my day with meditation. And so I do it first thing in the morning, like brush my teeth and I meditate. Because then the day hasn't started. Right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
the meetings haven't started, the demands haven't started, right? Like all that stuff hasn't started. So I've found that to be a practice that works really well. I do know though, for women with young kids, like when my daughter was little, that was
Yeah.
hard to
Yeah.
do because
Yeah.
she was up before I was. So
Yeah. And how old is your daughter now?
she's 15. Yeah,
Okay.
she's 15. She'll be 16 at the end of the year.
And I feel like that generation, I have two daughters, and I just feel like there's
Yeah.
such an exciting evolution of women that's coming our way. Do you,
I
what,
agree. I agree. I feel the same way. And I love hearing other women say that because, it's easy to kind of get caught up in the things that our girls are exposed to that we weren't, social media, like all the
right.
pressures, like, sure, yes, that's there. And I also think that there are, like, I look at my daughter at 15 and I feel like in a lot of ways, she has a lot more wisdom than I did at her age, right? Like there's just so much more available to her. And she thinks about herself, she thinks about the world, I feel, in a pretty evolved way, considering she's a teenager. So I agree. I do think it can be a very exciting time if we choose to raise our kids with that perspective.
Absolutely. It's a great point. And I sometimes wonder when I'm looking and watching them, what our mothers must think of us in terms of our evolution. And I know, when I get to talk to not just, my mom and mother-in-law, but other women of that demographic, and there's this sense of excitement for us and a little bit of not, I wouldn't say jealousy is not the right word, but a bit of like lost opportunity that they could have had
Yeah.
in their lives.
Yes. Yes.
And so it kind of motivates and empowers to keep going to really do justice and move the mark for our kids when they come. But I don't think
It's
they'll put
true.
up with it. I don't think they'll put
Yeah.
up with what we put up with. Like they're not taking
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so true. It's so true. And there's so, like, what's also really amazing is that there are so many, I think, amazing female leaders and role models. Like, I love that, right? Like, I love that my daughter really has grown up with this idea that she can do
Do
anything that
anything.
she
Yeah.
decides she wants to do,
Yeah.
right?
100%. That's an amazing, amazing point. I mean, we just didn't have that kind of exposure. I mean, I can remember I have a muscular body, and I remember, there's always just the Kate Mosses and the and
Yeah.
feeling like, oh my gosh. And then they're in the Sears catalog. I don't know if you remember these, but
Of course I do.
there was one picture of a Olympic synchronized swimmer, and she was muscular, and I
Uh-huh.
was like, oh, like I was just so excited,
Yeah.
And so, like, if
Yes.
you extrapolate that to the business world and all these amazing women that we have out there, it's pretty exciting. It's pretty
You're
exciting.
right. Yeah. And I often forget even like just physically what the ideal was for women growing up, right? Like it was same thing, right? It was like that very like skinny, like Kate Moss, like you said, like it was like a one size fits all sort of idea of what a woman should be like, right? And this
Yeah.
translated
Yeah.
professionally. This translated into how we show up as moms. This translated into how we show up in our relationships. And I think that
Yeah.
one of the most exciting things in 2025 is that all of like we've kind of like blown a lot of that out of the water, right? And we like I think women are beginning to see that. Wait a minute, there are a lot more options in terms of how I can show up.
I think so. I think so. And so for women who are really struggling and don't know where to start and feel like, it's just too late, like this is my life, what would you share with them from all of the women that you work with about what's possible for them?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think a lot of women think that like it's just too late. Like why
Hmm.
bother? Or something I hear all the time is it's too hard. Like it's too hard to make these changes now. Um, Here's what I will say. I probably at this point, like including as a psychotherapist, and I've probably worked with thousands of women at this point. I have never ever met a woman who has decided to go all in on herself and her transformation and regretted it. Never. Like not once have I met a woman who's like, you know what, I'm going to do it. It doesn't matter how old I am. It doesn't matter, what stage of life I find myself in. It doesn't matter, what else I have going on in my life. I'm going to go all in on myself, and I'm going to choose to create a life that is deeply fulfilling for me and regret that choice. It's just never happened.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think
it's pretty good stats.
I think when you put it that way, it's like, how could you afford not to at least give it a try?
Yes. Yes.
See what happens.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think women, we're finding fulfillment at later stages of life.
I think so. And I think too, defining what makes you fulfilled and stepping into that and into your power. And it can be whatever it is, but just own it and stop looking at other people and comparing yourself, and just be happy with what your choices are.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And that's something that took me a while to realize, is that what might be the ideal life for you might be completely different than the ideal life for me.
Yeah.
Right. And to really define fulfillment. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just define it for you, but make sure that it is yours, and step into it unapologetically.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Couldn't agree more.
Poof. It's just that simple. It's just that simple, right?
If only. But the decision, I think once the decision is made, right? I feel like that's,
Yes. Yeah. The rest is easy, really. I mean, the rest is easy.
The rest is. There's support for the rest, right?
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, that's how I look at it. I'm like, you can hire support for the rest, but it's like only you can make that decision.
Yes. And there's so much fulfillment in the journey of getting there that,
yes.
Yeah. So really that is the toughest point, is making that decision, and that's it.
And committing to it.
Easy peasy. Transformation.
Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, thank you. We won't keep you longer. I think that your messages are really important for women to hear, and it's never too late to step into determining what gives you a fulfilled life and putting the work in to make sure that you get it.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Hopefully we can talk again.
Yeah, I'd love that.